Scientific discovery and its influence on literature. How do scientific discoveries influence literature? By offering a jumping-off point for creative people to build fascinating narratives. I'm talking about science fiction. Back near the beginning of the 19th century, in 1818, 20-year-old Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley published a book called Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. If you haven't read it, you should. The movies don't do it justice. Shelley, who had grown up in a scholarly household, wove together Greek and Latin mythology, romance, and the emerging scientific ideas of her day into a compelling, sweeping story that ultimately asked us to question the ethics of scientific experimentation. Frankenstein is now considered, by many, to be the first true science fiction book. Shelley herself could be considered a modern Prometheus, since she created a genre. Nearly 200 years later, Shelley's story remains pertinent because we humans are still struggling with the ethics of science. In fact, a new book, Making the Monster, The Science Behind Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, by Catherine Harkup, was just released this week. In the latter half of the 19th century, in 1870, Jules Verne published 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Verne turned his fascination with scientific research and exploration into this riveting adventure story. A number of his literary inventions, such as Captain Nemo's submarine, predicted technologies that would later become reality. But Verne didn't stop at exploration of the seas. He went on to write about space travel and even what we might find at the center of the Earth. How many inventors might have been inspired by his words? Near the turn of the century, H.G. Wells began making a name for himself in science fiction. His book, The Time Machine, while taking its readers nearly 1,000,000 years into the past, is also a social commentary about the class system of the Victorian era. Science fiction gave Wells a platform to reach a new group of readers. A few years later, Wells wrote The War of the Worlds, about an alien race invading Earth from spaceships. Have you ever heard of Robert Goddard? Or maybe the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center? Well, The War of the Worlds inspired Goddard to become a physicist and an engineer, and he was responsible for inventing rocket propulsion systems and several other vital components that eventually led to manned spaceflight. The 20th century, particularly after World War II, saw a tremendous rise in the number of books published in the science fiction genre. George Orwell, Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, Ursula Le Guin, Madeleine L'Engle, Anne McCaffrey. The list goes on and on. Each of these authors has taken science and built a family or world or universe around it. In turn, each of those families, worlds, or universes has been the inspiration for countless people to study and work in the sciences. Literature has leaned on science and technology for inspiration, but the science fiction genre is not limited to books, but has also expanded into every type of media. In fact, the desire to produce science fiction in other forms has itself necessitated advances in science and technology. Take, for example, audiobooks. Originally, audiobooks were put on record albums and cassette tapes, and they were intended for use by the visually impaired. Later, when portable audio devices became affordable, audiobooks began to be made with the general public in mind, and they gained traction as entertainment for people on long commutes or to use while exercising and so forth. In 1997, Donald Katz founded Audible.com and introduced the world's first commercially available portable digital audio player. Since that time, nearly every portable computing platform has a method by which audiobooks can be heard. Technology inspired by books. By the way, of the 100,000 or so books on Audible, nearly 20% are in the science fiction genre. While I'm talking about science fiction in other forms, I can't fail to mention Star Trek. Yes, this franchise started as a television show, but it quickly expanded to comic books, movies, and novels. Additionally, that risque, egalitarian TV show spawned 5 spin-off shows, and even a series of movies based off the Infinite Worlds alternate timeline interpretation, more popularly known as the Chris Pine reboot. Star Trek's neato-science has affected millions of people because, let's face it, science is cool, and so is science fiction.